Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. We're going to begin our session today with meditation from the Kundalini tradition called the reverse Adi Shakti meditation. It's a meditation for self-love and self-healing realization. And it has a couple of different mudras in it. And it has a kind of an extended breathing technique with it, where we're going to inhale for about 10 seconds. Hold our breath in for about 10 seconds, and then exhale for about 10 seconds. And as you get better at that breath, you can elongate those segments. They stay the same in terms of it's the same amount of inhaling time, holding time, exhaling time, and you can work it all the way up to about 20 seconds a segment. That takes quite a bit of practice, however, so I'm not recommending that today. But for right now, about 10 seconds, inhaling, holding for 10, exhaling for 10. And while we hold the mudras, okay? So the first mudra is going to be with our left palm up, like we're sort of pledging allegiance, right? Like that, pulling the shoulders back. And then our right hand comes above our head and is like facing down towards the top of our head. So this is like a blessing mudra, basically. We're sort of blessing ourselves in this posture. So we're just going to hold the posture, right arm above the head, left palm facing straight ahead, shoulders back, crown up. You can close your eyes, gazing towards the eyebrow center. And then we begin to inhale through the nose in a nice steady breath. Hold at the top, gently elongate up. Engage the root lock gently, pull up towards the crown. Exhale through the nose. Inhale through the nose. Hold at the top, pull the shoulders and chin back, lengthen up through the crown, gently engage root lock, hold. Exhale through the nose. Inhale through the nose. Hold at the top, pull the shoulders, pull the chin, lengthen up to the crown. Shoulders back, chest up, crown up, gently engage root lock. Exhale through the nose. Inhale. Hold at the top, pull the shoulders and chin back, lengthen up to the crown, engage root lock, gently pull up. Exhale through the nose. Hold at the bottom. A moment. Inhale. Nice and steady. Steady, steady, steady. Holding at the top, shoulders and chin pull back, lift the heart, engage root lock gently. Exhale through the nose. Inhale. Hold the breath, open the heart, pull the shoulders, gently pull up through Sushumna, through that central energy channel towards the crown. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, shoulders back, chin back, crown up, gently pull up. Feel the energy opening. Exhale. And just softening with the breath, softening as though you're hugging yourself with the breath. Inhaling. Hold, shoulders back, chest up, crown up, shoulders together, lengthen. Exhaling. Inhale. Hold, engage. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, engage, pull up. As we exhale, we're going to bring our arms straight out in front of us, palms facing down. Pull the shoulders back and down, pull the chin. Inhale. Hold, shoulders back, chin back, crown up, gently engage. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, shoulders back, chin back, crown up. Soften the face, lift the heart. Exhale. Inhale. Hold at the top, shoulders back, chest up, crown up, gently pull up. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, shoulders back, chin back, chest up, crown up. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, shoulders back, engaging root lock. Exhale. Inhale. Hold. As you exhale, let your arms come straight up, palms face forward. Pull the shoulders back. Lengthen up. Inhale. Hold, chin back, crown up, open the heart, pull the shoulder blades. Exhale. Keep the crown up, spine elongated. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, shoulders back, chin back, lift up. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, engage, pull up, stay with it. Last minute here. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, chin lock, root lock, pull up. Exhale. Inhale. Hold, engage, lift up. As you exhale, very slowly, bring the arms down. Take your time. Feel, watch, notice. Bringing this sense of loving kindness into the heart, into the throat, into the belly, into the chest. Hands eventually come into the lap, right palm on top of the left, thumb tips touching. Pull your shoulders and chin back, lengthen up to the crown, and just feel for a moment. Soften, allow. That healing energy just flow over you. Sense of wellness, sense of centeredness. Letting go. Letting go. Letting go. Slowly opening your eyes. Exhale with a sigh. And just noticing how you feel right now after a few minutes of meditation, maybe a little bit different than you're used to with the mudras and the arms overhead. If you're not used to practicing like that, it can be a little strenuous. You can feel the heat, the tapas, but that's actually awesome. That means there's a sort of purification going on, a cleansing. And so if you practice something like that more, like if you were to do that every day for 10, that's actually, it's supposed to be a 17-minute meditation, but I shortened it up a little bit. And anyways, it's a really beautiful way of just being with sensations, being with that heart opening, all those energy lines opening. But you can actually start to feel like there's a clearing going on, an opening, a heart opening going on at the same time. And it's a beautiful meditation. You can do it to music as well. It's some nice meditation music going in the background, and just really focusing on that steadiness of the breath, the inhaling. It's nice and steady, holding, softening, letting that kind of little tapas, little heat build, and then releasing, nice and steady. And you're just focusing on your breath, and you're letting the sensations and the energy lines open while you do that. Sometimes it's pleasurable, sometimes it's unpleasurable. It really doesn't matter. You're focusing on your breath and focusing on that cleansing, on that self-healing, on that self-love. And so, yeah, anyways, I hope that was interesting at the very least, and maybe enjoyable, maybe not enjoyable. One of the things that Yogi Bhajan said is he basically said, if your meditation is always enjoyable, then you're not doing it right. Meaning, meditation is meant to be a healing method and a clearing method, and our stuff is going to come up into it. And so, yeah, sometimes it is really peaceful and beautiful and a kind of a refuge. At other times, and it's meant to be this way, it's actually meant to force our stuff up, and to actually be disquieting, be uncomfortable, so that we could start to build that strength of not just the physical strength of the body, but sort of the strength of the energy. Everything in a certain way is energy. Thoughts are energy. Sensation is energy, and what we're trying to build is the container for more and more energy, more and more divinity. Divinity includes everything. It includes the light, the dark. So there's no part of reality that isn't divine. And so what we are doing with our spiritual practices, our meditation practices, is building our capacity for more of reality, more of the truth. And so some of our practices are difficult, right? and that's okay. And so whatever arose during that 15 minutes was meant to arise. And one of the things is just to see how you feel afterwards. Often there's even though we might not have liked it or felt uncomfortable during it, we feel a sense of peace and equanimity and clearing, like something's left us, or something's been purified, that we don't even have to know what it is to have that sensation, that truth, that intuitive wisdom. So that's enough about the meditation. I hope it was good, and you're welcome to give me feedback. And please let me know what types of meditations are working well for you, what don't. As I try to mix things up a little bit to try to give different experiences to us, and there's literally hundreds of meditation techniques, maybe more than that, but certainly hundreds. And so there's lots of different ways of getting there. And this is an opportunity for us to explore them, find out which ones we like. So here we go down the journey of the yamas and the niyamas. We started last week with an introduction, and we'll continue this week with the first section, Ahimsa. And as many of you who've been with me for a while know, Ahimsa is there's a reason why it's the first lesson. And as I was kind of going through and preparing for today, I was just looking at the kind of whole book overall, and I noticed that the Ahimsa, not only is it the first lesson, but from this author's perspective, it's also the one in which she's written the most. She has the longest, basically there's more pages in this section than in any other section by a considerable margin, 30% more than the next one. And so she obviously cares about it a lot. And I think for good reason, because as I've mentioned before, it's really the foundation upon which the whole rest of our spiritual program resides, and without it, we're just not going to get there. And so we can do other things. We can do postures till kingdom come. We can do breathing forever too, and those things will be helpful, but we will not really get free of our suffering until we look at all of the yamas and the niyamas and make sure that that foundation is in place. As I've said before, yoga postures without intention are really just exercise, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's people go to yoga classes saying often, oh, I'm going to do my exercise now. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. And there's some wonderful teachings and teachers out there that focus primarily on the physical aspect of the practice. But it's a very different thing when you start to look at your yoga practice as an enlightenment practice, or a freedom practice, or a sort of refuge practice, however you want to look at it. It's like, how can I start to shift my awareness of reality, right? And once we realize that that's possible, then yoga practice becomes something quite different. And this is where the yamas and the niyamas really come in to help us see the possibilities, see where we're at, and then start to come up with a game plan to move from where we're at to what is possible. And so that's what I really love about the yamas and the niyamas, is that kind of overview of the whole journey. And we'll talk more about where she focuses her attention. And it was kind of interesting anecdotal to see how much attention in terms of just pages she commits to the different yamas and niyamas. And so we'll talk about that more subsequently. We'll see how far we get today with the Ahimsa. We may have to actually commit 2 sessions to this because it's so big and important. And she goes into some really good aspects, at least from her. Again, this is her perspective. Other people are going to interpret the yamas and niyamas differently, similarly. They're not going to change the definition, but they're going to focus on different insights. And so, but we're going to use her insights as a starting place, and then we can bring in our own. I'll certainly bring in mine, right? But you're also welcome to bring in your own perspective on what nonviolence means, right? So Ahimsa is directly translated as nonviolence, right? And the idea of loving kindness is actually an interpretation of that definition. And but then there are other things that she goes into, and we're going to talk about those today. She talks about courage and balance and powerlessness and self-love, compassion. And so these are all other nuances, other reflections upon the idea of nonviolence. And but I think they're quite helpful, and we can kind of look at each, and we can actually, one of the things I hope to do today is start to ask ourselves some questions in regards to each of these aspects of ourselves. And so we can, as I said before, we can do a kind of inventory of ourselves in relation to the yamas and the niyamas. That tends to be, I will forewarn you, a humbling experience. And so it's not usually like, oh, I'm doing great. It's more like, oh, I've got a ways to go. And that's okay. That's really okay. And we're going to ebb and flow with these things. Some days we're going to feel pretty in the flow and kind of moving pretty gracefully. And other days it's going to be a hot mess. Honestly, that's just the way it is. And so, so accepting that journey, and what we're doing with our practice is trying to, over time, be in that gracefulness more often, and knowing that there are going to be shadow days, or days where it's going to be more challenging than other days. And then using the practice, say the practice of Ahimsa, to be okay with that, right? Sometimes, and I've done this recently, I'll start feeling badly about feeling badly. And then you're in this like little vicious spiral where you're feeling like, I'm not having a particularly good day, or I'm frustrated, or I'm impatient, and then I'll start getting angry at myself for being frustrated or impatient, right? And then so now you're just in this kind of like downward spiral, moving away from equanimity, right? One of the ways we sort of see this little litmus test we can say is, how much am I in equanimity? How much am I not being frustrated by little things, or by things that I don't have any control over? That's a pretty good litmus test of how enlightened we are. And I've said this in class before, how often am I frustrated? And my frustration is a not accepting of reality, right? It's a non-acceptance of reality. And that's a pretty good indication. Now, it doesn't mean we're bad, doesn't mean we're bad yogis even. It just means that that's where we are right now. And how can we start to implore practices that are going to get us more in harmony with ourselves, others, and the world as it is? I use that mantra a lot, right? I'm at peace with myself as I am, the world as it is, and others as they are. It's a beautiful mantra. I use it probably every day. I use it. I'll just implore it. I'll just bring it into my consciousness. I'll bring it into my meditation. Doesn't mean I'm always in that space. It doesn't mean I'm always feeling really genuine in that. It's a reminder, right? It's a reminder. It's a place that I am in sometimes. Sometimes I am in that place. And the thing about, full enlightenment realization is that you're in that place all the time, but that's not where we are really. So, we are in our householder incarnation, working with everything that we have here, and we're ebbing and flowing with our equanimity. But we can use a mantra like that to remind us of the possibility, remind us that, yeah, this place always exists. The place of peace and equanimity is always within us. We have just, we've like stepped away. So like we've closed the door on it temporarily, and we're off on some other tangent of delusion. So, but that's part of our human existence. That's kind of what we do. We have a part of our ego, which is ever vigilant. And that part of our vigilant ego is always looking for danger, always looking for something to be concerned about, right? It's why I said, like last week, the best thing I did last week was turn off the news feed on my phone, right? And that was a really good thing, because the phone is designed to capture my attention, right? Anything on that cell phone is designed to capture all the algorithms are set up to capture your attention. And they mostly are set up with hyperbole in some way, some form of alarm, right? That's what actually captures my attention, because my brain is wired from way, way, way back to look out for danger, right? And so, and so the phone is actually sending me little, danger Will Robinson messages, like, and so that I'll pay attention to it, right? It's trying to keep me engaged. And so we have to kind of discipline ourselves in these times. This is an act of ahimsa. I'm kind of going down this road at the moment, is to discipline ourselves to not pay as much attention to things which don't bring us to peace and equanimity. Doesn't mean we're putting our heads in the sand, right? We're just disciplining ourselves to keep our attention focused on the things that bring us towards peace and equanimity. Right. And so, that could be a challenging thing. It could be working on a work project, or something that's, working with a person who is challenging or difficult, or has a problem that we're trying to help solve. But at least in those moments, we're focusing on something on which we might be able to have a tangible result that is graceful, moves us and the people closest to us into some better place, as opposed to spending a huge amount of time thinking about the election, for instance, and not that that's not important, because it is important, but if I'm spending 2 hours a day talking about the election, then I'm spinning my wheels, right? I am just off, and I'm not making myself happy, not making anybody else really happy doing that. And so we just have to kind of, again, Ahimsa is this practice of loving kindness, non-violence with ourselves, and how do we set up our lives in ways to promote that, and just be careful. Does anybody want to make any comment right now before I get sort of dive into some of what Deborah's talking about here in her places? Everybody good? Awesome. I'm going to just start right in here near the beginning. When we feel hurried, afraid, powerless, out of balance, and harsh with ourselves, we may find ourselves speaking words of unkindness or even exploding with a violent outburst. As our awareness of these nuances grows, we learn that our ability to be nonviolent to others is directly related to our ability to be nonviolent within ourselves. Our inner strength and character determine our ability to be a person of peace at home and in the world. Our capacity to be nonviolent depends on our proactive practice of courage, balance, love of self, and compassion for others. So I just wanted to stop here for a moment and see if anyone wants to make any comment about this link, okay? Because this is kind of a crucial link between how we are to others, how we relate to the world, and how we relate to ourselves. Okay, does this make any sense to anybody or not make sense to people? Anybody want to make any comment about that? Again, Barbara does, but hang on, I just want to make one announcement in case you're not aware that I am taping this, and it's probably going to go up on YouTube. So just feel free to share whatever you'd like, but I want you to know that. Barbara?
Yeah, I had read this piece a little bit ago, and it really resonated with me because we managed to hide our fear, I'm trying to think of the right words, the things about ourselves that we don't necessarily like, or the feelings that we have, by being nice to other people. Mm-hmm. However, it's not really authentic, because if we're not being compassionate with ourselves, we are not going to be able to be compassionate with other people. And I'm probably my own worst critic, I would say. And you realize at the end of the day, well, what did I do? Wow, I criticized myself for everything I felt that I didn't do right, which was a lot. Mm-hmm. Instead of going, okay, so what? I didn't do X, Y, and Z, but it's okay. Right. I can let it go. So yeah. I'm assuming that this is a way of going to myself, okay, it's okay, it's okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. Can anyone else relate to what Barbara just said about that self-critique, that self-criticism? Denise, you want to say something?
Yeah, I feel it's like it's dealing with the truth And I think what I see, well, with myself, I I like to deal with the truth in myself, and then how I deal with how that relates to others is honesty. I'm not putting on a facade. I
Mhm.
have noticed, and I've talked about it with many people, family, some friends that can handle it, but you don't have to paint a picture that's not real. And so, therefore, you might want to put forward to the world or other people how wonderful everything is, how wonderful you're feeling, or treating them in a way that could be really great or not so great. Why don't you start with yourself first, right? And see, because that's how you're going to relate to the world or to others, as how you're treating yourself. Does that make sense? It's the truth is what I'm trying to get at, and I always try to explain that to people. The truth isn't about lying,
Mhm.
and that it's about the truth of who your being is and how you really are, not how you want other people to see you, but how you are inside. And before you can go there and treat other people or relate to other people, you must be able to do it to yourself. How do you feel yourself? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, actually. And Swami Kripalo said, and he'd been here for a while, and working, with people in the West. And at one point, he said that the biggest impediment to people in the West in their own enlightenment and own becoming free of their suffering is their own self-loathing, basically. So basically, we have to, that's, he said, is their biggest impediment, right? So that, there are others, but that's like your big one. And it's really hard to see. It's very subversive, right? It's almost unconscious, that kind of self-criticism, that kind of, but one of the things that I've noticed about myself is that when I start feeling bad, I will notice how the biggest thing I lose is my patience, right? So I start getting impatient. And not only, but that impatience starts to seep out. So first I'm impatient with myself. I'm not good enough in some way. I'm not getting something done, whatever it is. And then it starts seeping out, right? I start, maybe, saying stuff under my breath on the highway to other, and then the next thing I know, it's like seeping out with other people too. And that's a really good sign that I am just going down this road of self-deprecation, because it's now getting reflected out into the rest of the world. And so I think, and as to Barbara's point is, we can try, and I think all of us have tried to fake it till we make it kind of thing. It's sort of just like, well, if I'm a nice person to others, then I am a nice person. If I'm polite to you and nice to other and do something kind, then I am by definition, I'm a nice person or I'm a good person, right? And we all get taught this to a certain extent. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it might not be as genuine as truly loving ourselves, right? It's more like we've been taught to be a nice person because that's how we fit in, and we sort of get the accolades that our ego needs. Oh, isn't she a nice person? Isn't she a good person? So our ego feels better, but actually underneath, we can still be not very good, and we could be passive aggressive in some way. There's that whole kind of like, I'm saying something nice about somebody in one moment, but then I'll say something bad about them behind their back later, that kind of thing. That's not nice, but we do it a lot. This is what gossip kind of relies on. Gossip relies on that whole schism between kind of what we're presenting out there in the world and then how we really feel. And we tend to we don't gossip about ourselves, we gossip about other people, right? So, and it makes our ego feel better. But when we realize when we're doing that, it's actually a form of violence. We are, gossip is violence, right? So we're not practicing Ahimsa in that moment. And yet it feels good, right? Because our ego we're feeling better about ourselves in some way. So this is a good example of, I really haven't done enough of my self-work. Because if we're really doing a lot of self-work, then we're not going to really spend any time disparaging other people, because everybody's sort of going through, as somebody said, everybody's fighting a hard battle, right? And so we're going to have this compassion for that hard battle. And it doesn't mean we approve of what everybody's doing. And, we can all have examples of people who we don't approve of. But we're not spending time disparaging them because we're at peace with ourselves. And we sort of know that everything is kind of, everything is working out, even though it may not be working out the way we like. And it may be kind of difficult, and so it's just a way of our ego getting a sense of groundlessness, as opposed to being able to build this capacity for groundlessness, and that actually is that yogic path of how can I be okay without having everything line up the way I would like it to line up. Having everything line up the way I would like it to line up is an egoic construct, right? But can I actually be okay? Can I be graceful? Can I be aware? Can I be kind? Can I be in the truth, as Denise was saying, when things aren't working out the way I would like them to be? This is a profound practice.
And Greg, that too, the loving kindness of the truth, when you start with yourself, it's not always great. Everything, the truth or the Ahimsa that I may feel before I go to anybody else, sometimes it is a tough day. Sometimes I'm hard on myself and whatever is going on. So it's not like my truth is, oh God, I'm so wonderful. There's no nonviolence is here all the time. No, sometimes it is tough, but I think, and so that's another reality, is the truth isn't always like you're perfect, and loving kindness is everywhere, every second. So when you do go outside to relate to someone else, it may be a little tough, I find myself in that way. There is maybe a frustration and I'm trying to deal with it myself. And then I have to go relate to someone that is not making life easy. And it is tough. So, and the truth in my moment is, then I accept that too. It's not always, loving kindness like you think it is, but I'm still being honest with myself and my own truth, right?
Sure. I think one of the things is just recognizing, so that recognition is where the truth, and we're going to talk a lot about satya, which is truthfulness, in the next chapter. So that's the whole, so we've got loving kindness and the truth. These are the two pillars. And there's one more, which we'll talk about in the niyamas, which I think there's really three pillars, kind of like a stool, that hold all the yamas and niyamas together. And it's really the first two, which is Ahimsa and Satya, which is the truth. And then the very last one, which is the niyama of surrender, Ishvara Pranidhana. Those are the sort of three pillars that actually hold all of the yamas and niyas and really the whole practice of yoga together. And so we're going to talk about each one of those subsequently. Yeah, it's really, so recognizing like, oh yeah, I really don't feel good about this. So, but how in knowing that, I can articulate from a place of more genuine authenticity with whatever I'm dealing with. Maybe I'm dealing with a person who's challenging that moment. I don't have to put on a nice face necessarily and say, oh yeah, everything's fine. One of the things when you get asked, or maybe you asked other people, how are you today? Right? Or you get asked, how are you today? Say, oh, I'm fine. Yeah, that's almost always a lie. Okay. And because, it's a way of I don't want to actually explore what is really going on with me right now. I don't want to explore it with myself, and I darn well don't want to explore it with you. Right? So, it's like saying fine is a way of just obfuscating the truth. But, in that moment, maybe that's the best we can come up with, right? We're not ready. We're not ready to explore how I really am. And I'm certainly not ready to be vulnerable with you because I either don't trust myself, which is the number one thing, or I don't trust you in some way, which really comes back to not trusting myself. Because really, if we trusted what was going on in ourselves, we really wouldn't care what the other person's reaction to that is. We would, we obviously want empathy and compassion, but if we really trusted the process of the truth, whether the person reacted kindly or kind of, reacted like, teasing or something like that, it wouldn't really matter to us. But that's okay. We're not there. We are these vulnerable beings, and we're not completely. We haven't done enough of that inner work to really be okay with all the shadow aspects of ourselves. But that's where Ahimsa is taking us. Ahimsa is taking us basically, ultimately, into the shadows of ourself, into the inner child of ourself, into the stuff where we feel most vulnerable, and giving ourselves the capacity to become loving kindness. I mean, ultimately, as I said in my newsletter this week, we first see where we are. How am I doing with self-compassion, right? And most of us, if we're honest, are like, not so great, but we realize that it is possible. It is possible to become an embodiment of loving kindness. It is possible, but the way through is through that shadow work, through noticing when we're reacting, when we're getting triggered, what is coming up, exploring that, being with that, seeing what probably some inner child issue needs to be healed, and then coming from that place of healing, we have this enlarged capacity. Because we've done it with ourselves, we've now enlarged our capacity for compassion. We've built a bigger container in which we can feel and empathize with others. If you haven't done any of this work, and you've probably noticed this with some people who have very low compassion or very low empathy with other people, is that there's no there with them. They haven't done any of this work on themselves. They've built up these walls of protection, not only towards others, but towards their own vulnerabilities and idiosyncrasies. And so they just become this kind of walled mass of ego that doesn't ever have a chance for introspection, softness, and so it's kind of intense. Madeline, did you want to say something?
Yeah, two things. One is that a lot of people are very frustrated, and their way of getting rid of this frustration is lashing out at other people. Okay, unfortunately. The other thing is, I wanted to say, is when you ask someone how they're doing and they say they're fine, it's because they don't want to deal with the problems.
Mm-hmm.
If they say they're fine, it means they themselves are okay. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to tell you. If you say it, it's real. Once people say things, and if they don't say it, then maybe it isn't real. Maybe I really am fine. And they really are lying to themselves, of course.
Right. They're delusional, which is okay. Like, listen, I think we have to, again, be kind to ourselves about the degree to which we delude ourselves.
But I think we need to get it out, tell people that we're really not fine, that we are having these feelings, because once you say it, it's real. And then you hear it. You know how you use more, I used to teach, and I used to say, the more senses you use, the more real it is. And it's a way of focusing. If you say it, it becomes real. Mm-hmm. And somebody else hears it. Even if they don't hear it, just say it out loud. It makes you feel better. Mm-hmm. It really does. I talk to myself a lot.
Well, Madeline, if I can just say just a quick fun anecdote, and I do like to talk. I think you guys sort of get that.
We all do.
Right. But when somebody says, "How are you?" to me, and it's on the phone, it could be someone I've never met. It could be a medical office. You're making an appointment, whatever. How are you? And if I'm caught, and I've been caught in moments, especially with the pandemic and the testing and everything I've been involved with my kids, and I never say fine. And it's funny, this is bringing it to my awareness, us talking about it. I always say, well, well, listen, because of X, Y, Z, and I'm laughing about it. I'm not laying it on someone heavy, but after a bit they're chuckling or whatever. And I go, listen, you asked, and we end, and I'm feeling good because I'm telling the truth of where I'm at in that moment or that day. And then they get to hear it. And of course it's not personal stuff, but it's the truth of where I'm at. And so at the end, it's always the preface, well, you did ask me. And it's always a good end to the call or whatever, but it's easy to say I'm fine. And then they're not.
It's true.
It's like,
Right.
and if you are fine, God bless you,
Okay.
But I just wanted to add one more scenario to that.
Yeah,
That
me too.
sometimes people ask you how you are, but they don't really want to hear how you are.
You're right.
Mhm.
yeah.
So then, because I usually say how I am, and then I have not. If it's people that I know that know me, that are my friends, they do truly want to hear how I am, and then they'll just say all of that. But other times, you can see people immediately. If you don't say I'm fine, either they withdraw or they move on to the next subject, or you can tell that they really don't care how you are. It's
Mhm.
almost like a polite expression. So there's also that sometimes you say you're fine because you don't really know if people really mean what they're saying, if you don't know them.
Mhm.
But I agree that there's no point in just saying it as a greeting almost, right? Either you say how you are or you don't, and you don't have to get into details. And if people are genuine, then they will laugh about it, and
Right.
they will kind of be on the same page with you.
I
My
think-
mother,
Go ahead.
my mother used to say, I still remember this, and this is, of course, before the pandemic and everything. She used to say, if you don't want to know how someone is, just say hi.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
She did. She always used to say that.
Yeah, that's I think this is more something to reflect on ourselves. There are these kind of colloquialisms that are going to go on in polite, sort of, as you were saying, Demetra. We're not going to change everybody out there, right? So that's not going to happen, at least not right away. What we can do is work on ourselves and notice ourselves maybe when we're saying fine to somebody asking how we are, or noticing when we're asking someone how they are and maybe they give us either fine or not so fine. In noticing, was when they said fine, was that perfectly adequate for us? We feel like, oh, thank goodness they didn't share more with me. Why was I asking that question?
That's like my mom.
So it's more for our benefit who are trying to practice Ahimsa more genuinely, practice our yoga more genuinely, to notice our reaction to that question. Am I fine? Are you fine? And just that little subtle dance that we do around that one question of how am I, right? How am I? It's actually a pretty deep question because there's a lot to all of us, really. And how willing am I to both go into my own state of being or be patient with and be available for somebody else in their state of being? I mean, so much of our interactions with other people are really surface politeness in some way, just surface, like is the way we act. And some of that's necessary because, we're trying to get through our day. We're trying to go to the grocery store. We don't want to ask everybody in the grocery store, how are they, right? We don't have the bandwidth for that. And so, but it would be an interesting experiment. You could spend the day at the grocery store, pre-pandemic, and just ask people how they are and see what that was like. That would actually be an incredible experiment to do, and so this is what I mean by doing little things that make us more aware, of how we tend to be with ourselves and how we tend to be with each other around the practice of nonviolence and loving kindness. We're almost out of time. I thought I would just read a little bit more from the first part. I think we're going to have to spend some more time on this because we haven't really taken advantage of some of the stuff that Deborah shared here. But I'll just share a little bit more and then maybe get a couple more comments, and we'll close up for today. We can maybe have a little post conversation, and we can continue next time as well. I'll just read here for a moment from this section on courage and finding our courage, which I liked. We only have to look around to see that fear abounds. It abounds in cowardly faces that turn away, in violent attacks, in walls of protection, in bins of possessions, in numerous unkind words and gestures. In an abundant world, hoarders take more than their share, leaving others lacking. Wars are started and fought to seize the goods and keep the power. All around the world, children's innocence is destroyed by abuse and horror. If we look closely, we can trace all of these acts of greed, control, and insecurity back to the root: fear. Fear creates violence. If we are to begin to address these fears, we need to know the difference between the fears that keep us alive and the fears that keep us from living. The first kind of fear is instinctual and built in us for survival. The second kind of fear is a fear of the unfamiliar. The unfamiliar can become an abundant place for our exploration once we realize this fear lives only in our imagination. It is only our minds that have created the turmoil in our gut and kept us hostage to the possibility of our own lives. So I wanted to kind of finish up today on this discussion around fear, because fear is the thing that really motivates most of our violence. You know, we are afraid on some level that we're not going to be okay. I'm not going to be okay. And so we lash out in some way. We're either trying to control, as she mentioned, kind of like hoarding things in some way, or some kind of attack in some way. And so it's just, maybe we could just talk for a couple more minutes about how our not being loving and kind has to really do with what we're afraid of. And when we get afraid, how we act in ways which are maybe less than kind to ourselves or others. Does anybody want to make any comment about that?
Yes. Yes. I find that I have different types of fears. The fear that I can deal with, I personally can deal with, are things like, for example, she uses in the book the fear of skydiving that she could never do. Mm-hmm. I found that actually skydiving was an easy thing for me to do. All I had to do was jump out of a plane, and I did it several times, so I just didn't do it once. Actually, the scariest thing is jump 2. Jump 1 is easy. Jump 2 is a lot more difficult to do, because then you know what you're getting into, sort of. Jump 1, jumping out, means that, okay, something could have gone wrong and I could have died, but I wouldn't have suffered. For me, the emotional fear is much worse. Dealing with myself, my fears, the stories I've made up about my life, that kind of fear is much harder for me to deal with. And I have a great mentor. I think you know who he is. And he's helped me address those fears. And it allows me to free myself up, because worrying is a way of distracting yourself with fear. Right. If I worry about something, then that's just giving birth to fears that don't even happen. They haven't happened. They're somewhere in the future. They may never happen. Right.
Worry is a form of violence for ourselves, and then we tend to project it onto others. So worrying, again, is something to watch. And she talks about that in the book too, like just, noticing when we're kind of caught in worry. Worry is more than just a concern. We're actually kind of obsessing about something bad happening to ourselves or someone else. And that's actually a form of violence to ourselves and possibly the other person if we start projecting, if we start trying to control that other person's behavior in some way. So I think that this is, a really again, look at your argument. Look at when you argue with somebody and notice that that argument that you're having is almost always based on some fear that something's not going to work out the way you want it to happen or you think it should happen. So, there's some fear behind that argument. There's a quote by the Buddha, I believe, where he says, once you know the truth, how can you argue? And so what he's trying to get at Denise's point is, if you're getting to something that is the truth of our basic okayness, then why do we feel like it has to be different than that in some way? And it's because we're afraid. We're afraid of, again, things aren't going to work out the way we want them to. We're going to lose something, and so we can just look at when we're arguing or when we're worrying. It's really, and what is that behind it? And it's always some egoic fear of how I want the world to be, and then we start to act, which are maybe not kind. And so, just something to contemplate. This is where we ask ourselves, how am I with my own kindness? How am I with my fear? How frustrated do I get? We just be honest with ourselves and say it's okay wherever we are, and yet how can I start to move to a place of let's cultivate courage. Let's start to use fear as a compass, and where is it taking us? How can we lean into places where I'm afraid? How can I be maybe in a conversation with somebody that is challenging, but not start to, and take ownership of my own stuff within it, right? My own, I'm getting triggered. I'm getting jealous. I'm getting whatever that fear is. And how can I maybe articulate that without projecting it onto the other person?
I think our greatest fear is the things we cannot control. And we can't control everything. So we think about those fears. I mean, we can't control this virus, certainly. And I think that a lot of people are afraid of that, what they can't control. And they become very frustrated. They lash out. But you know what I do notice? A lot of people who are frustrated and lash out say they're sorry afterwards because they realize that they've done something wrong to hurt you and they want to apologize. And I think that they feel better afterwards. And you're right, they want to be loved. I mean, that's why people, unfortunately, that's why people do things because they all want to be loved. I wonder sometimes if they do it because they want to do it or they just want to be loved. They want to be patted on the back. We're taught that if you do something good, we'll take care of you.
Right. So let's finish up on that note, because I think it's a beautiful one, Madeline, that we want to be loved, right? So we're running around trying to prove ourselves worthy in some way and be nice to other people so that we'll be loved, right? And what if we were already loved? What if we already knew we had a lot of self-love, and we knew that we were kind of connected to our divinity, which is what we'll talk about later and subsequently. And then we would feel okay, and we wouldn't be needing this other person to affirm us in order to be okay, right? Part of that argument that we're having with someone is we want affirmation in the way we want affirmation, which has got all to, again, we can go back to inner child stuff and how our parents were, and all this sort of psychology of it. But the fact is we want to be loved the way we want to be loved. Yes. And so we're trying to manipulate the world around so it will love us the way we want to be loved. What if we just were love? What if we were love? Then we wouldn't be running around trying to get it from other people. We would be able to enjoy it. And guess what? I think, I could be wrong about this, but the more, and she alludes to this in the book near the end, where she gives an example of someone she met. the more we are in that space of loving kindness, not with any arrogance, but with real humility towards ourselves, the more attractive we become. And people will want to be in that space with us. This is why people want to be with these gurus around the world who can't even speak English, like there's the story of Swami Kripalo, and there's others, who people just wanted to be around. They couldn't even understand what they were saying. They just wanted to be around them because they were an embodiment of love. It's like, I want to be in the space that guy's in, So I want to be close to them so that I can be with them. I can be with their space. And so what if we could just practice ahimsa with ourselves and stop becoming so neurotic, really, about trying to get that met from other people and outside, get that affirmation from other people. We're going to need it to some extent. We're egoic beings running around in a domestic world. But maybe if we needed it less, we would actually get it more. You see what I mean? So I think that's a pretty good idea to just let's just kind of softly lean into that, kind of like my cat here, and softly, yeah, he's definitely in ahimsa, this guy, most of the time. Softly lean in, and just, again, I think so much of this has to do with just being like compassionate with ourselves. Like there's just there's no way you could do that too much, all right, at this point, right? There's no way you could overindulge in genuine compassion for ourselves. I'm not saying build up our egos, say, how great we are. I'm talking about really holding ourselves gently and kindly. We all need that right now. And we need it from each other, but the real place we need it is from ourselves, to just be kind to ourselves and to be patient and loving. That will change the world, and it will change our world for ourselves and start to change the world around us. So I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to just close out this session, turn off the video, and we'll stay online for a couple more minutes. Let's close our eyes, feeling the shoulders back and down, feel the crown up towards the sky. Begin to breathe deeply through the nose into the belly, inhaling, chest and belly rising. Chest and belly falling, soften the shoulders, soften the face. Take another deep inhale. Exhale. Bring the palms together, the heart center. Take a deep inhale. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May there be peace, peace, peace. Namaste.